I had always thought our life together was flawless, like a perfect painting hanging on the wall, one that no brushstroke could ever mar. Lyra and I had been inseparable since our youth. From the moment we met in college, something clicked. The world seemed to pause when she smiled, and I believed, truly believed, that we were destined for each other. We got married in a small ceremony, surrounded by family and friends, with promises that felt like they would last forever. The house we built together was our sanctuary, a place where we'd laugh, love, and grow old side by side. But now, as I stand in the doorway of our bedroom, something feels wrong. The air is thick with a silence that should never have been there. Lyra is sitting on the bed, her back to me, her focus entirely on the phone in her hand. I don't know why, but I feel this gnawing sensation in my chest, a tightness that I can't shake. I've been away at work more lately, longer hours, less time spent at home. The routine has become something we're both accustomed to, but in that comfort, I feel the distance grow between us. I try to shake the feeling, telling myself that it's just the weight of daily life, that things will go back to normal once the dust settles. But the doubts start to creep in, small things, insignificant on their own, yet impossible to ignore when they pile up. Lyra's late-night calls, the sudden bursts of laughter when she's talking to someone in the other room. When I ask her who she's talking to, she always gives a vague answer, a quick change of subject. I start to wonder if I'm losing her, even though she's sitting right here in front of me. I try to tell myself that I'm overthinking it, that I'm just being paranoid. Lyra has always been trustworthy, always the woman I married. Yet, the gnawing feeling refuses to leave. It starts one evening when I come home early. I know something is off because she's not home. Her car is parked in the driveway, but the house is silent. I walk upstairs, unsure of what I'm looking for, but knowing that something isn't right. It's in the smallest of details, the way her jacket is thrown across the chair, the way the air feels heavier than usual. Like something unspoken is filling the room. Then it hits me, there's an unfamiliar scent in the air, something not quite her, and I freeze. It's then that I find it, her phone, lying face up on the bedside table. I know I shouldn't. I know I shouldn't look. But the temptation is too strong, the questions gnawing at my soul. My hands tremble as I unlock the phone. I'm not sure what I expect to find, but the moment I see the text messages, the world shatters. They're from Caleb. The familiar name, the man I've known as just a distant acquaintance from her past. But these messages, they're more than friendly. I read words that betray the trust I've always had in her. Words that tear through the foundation of our relationship like a storm ripping apart a house. I miss you. Can't wait to see you again. I need you. My heart drops. I feel dizzy, my mind racing to make sense of what I'm seeing. I stare at the screen in disbelief. Caleb. Her ex. The man she had known before me, the man I thought was nothing more than a ghost of the past. How long had this been going on? How could I not see it? The guilt begins to creep in, the crushing realization that I missed something, that I failed to protect what we had built. I want to scream, to confront her right here, but all I can do is sit there, numb, staring at her phone. I hear the soft sound of footsteps coming up the stairs, and I quickly hide the phone under my hand, my pulse pounding in my ears. When Lyra walks in, her smile falters when she sees my expression. "Lucas," she asks, her voice soft but cautious, as if she already knows what I've discovered. I don't answer right away. I just look at her, my gaze hardening. She stands frozen, waiting, unsure of what's coming. But I know now. The truth is hanging between us like a dark cloud, and I can no longer deny it. "Lyra," I finally say, my voice barely above a whisper. "What's going on?" Her face pales, and I see the guilt in her eyes before she even speaks. She looks away, and the weight of her silence speaks volumes. Lucas, she starts, but I hold up my hand. To stop her. I don't want to hear the excuses. Not now. Not after everything. The air in the room is thick, like it's pressing down on me, suffocating me. I want to scream, to run, to throw everything away. But I stand there, in the middle of the life we built, feeling the ground slip out from under me. Who is Caleb? I ask, though I already know the answer. Tears well up in her eyes, and she opens her mouth to speak, but nothing comes out. The weight of her silence is more than I can bear. And in that moment, everything I believed in crumbles. Our perfect life, our perfect marriage, it was all a lie. The illusion of it all, the fairy tale we once lived, has shattered into 1,000 pieces, and I'm left standing here, alone, trying to make sense of the impossible truth. I loved her. I still love her. But that love now feels like a distant memory, slipping further away with every second. Why, is all I can ask. But she doesn't answer, not the way I need her to. Instead, she takes a step toward me, her hand trembling as it reaches out to touch mine. But I pull back, as if her touch is burning me. The trust one had in her, the trust we had in each other, it's gone. And I don't know if it's something I can ever get back. The night stretches on, and the words we don't say hang heavy between us. We stand there in the wreckage of what used to be, and I wonder if I'll ever find the strength to pick up the pieces. The days that followed were a blur of confusion, anger, and disbelief. I couldn't escape the images from Lyra's phone, the words she had exchanged with Caleb. They replayed in my mind over and over like an endless loop, each time more painful than the last. My heart ached for the woman I thought I knew, my wife, my partner, the mother of my children, yet the person standing before me now felt like a stranger. It's strange how something so small, so seemingly insignificant, can change everything. In our marriage, there had always been a quiet rhythm. Lyra would go to work, I'd come home late from my meetings, the kids would laugh, the house would hum with life. But lately, something had shifted, and I had been too caught up in my own life to notice. I thought it was just stress, just the daily grind. But now, everything made sense in a way I didn't want it to. The cracks had always been there, I just hadn't seen them. The evening after I found out, we barely spoke. Lyra sat in the living room, her face pale, eyes swollen from the tears she had shed. I couldn't look at her. I could hardly breathe. I sat on the opposite couch, staring at the floor, as if it could offer me some escape from the suffocating reality. We had tried to speak, to make sense of what had happened, but the words we exchanged were empty, fragments of a conversation that no longer mattered. Lucas, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell her it didn't matter. That sorry meant nothing. That she had betrayed me in the worst way. But I couldn't. My heart was torn between love and rage, between the woman I had shared my life with and the stranger who had betrayed me. Instead, I just shook my head. I don't know if I can believe you anymore, I said, my voice strained. The words cut through me like a blade. Lyra's eyes filled with tears again. I never wanted to hurt you. I was just so lonely. I felt like we were drifting apart. The words stung, but I couldn't bring myself to be sympathetic. I had been busy, yes. But I had never once stopped loving her. Never once had I felt like we were slipping away. Yet. Apparently, she had. I didn't want this to happen, Lucas. I didn't want to fall for him, she continued, her hands wringing together in her lap. It just happened. I wanted to yell, to scream that it was all an excuse. That it was her choice. That she had crossed a line she could never come back from. But I didn't. Instead, I stood up, pacing the room, trying to fight the overwhelming feelings that were threatening to consume me. The anger, the betrayal, it was too much. I need some air, I said, my voice thick. Without waiting for a response, I walked out the door, not sure where I was going, just needing to be away from her. Away from everything that reminded me of what we had lost. The following days were a fog of sleepless nights and restless days. I couldn't eat. I couldn't focus. Every corner of our house seemed to mock me, each room holding memories of a time before all of this, the late-night talks in the kitchen, the laughter we shared with the kids, the quiet moments when everything felt right. Now it was all tainted. Every corner of the house felt like a prison, every shadow carrying the weight of her betrayal. I tried to avoid her as much as possible. We'd talk about the kids, about the mundane things that needed to be done, but beyond that, there was nothing. No warmth. No comfort. No connection. We were two strangers living in the same space, haunted by the ghosts of what once was. My mind wouldn't let go of the thought of Caleb. The man who had slipped into our lives, who had taken what wasn't his. The man who had made her feel something I couldn't anymore. I wanted to confront him. I wanted to look him in the eye and make him understand how much pain he had caused. But I knew it wouldn't help. The damage was done. Lyra had already made her choice. She had already crossed that line. One night, I couldn't sleep. The weight of it all, her betrayal, the lies, was suffocating. I found myself standing by the window, staring into the dark. The world outside seemed so still, so quiet, yet inside, I was a storm. The silence in the house was deafening, the emptiness of our marriage ringing in my ears. I grabbed my phone and dialed Ian's number. He was the one person who knew me better than anyone, the one person I could trust with my thoughts, my pain. "Hey, man," Ian answered, his voice groggy. "It's late. Everything okay?" "I can't do this anymore, Ian," I said, my voice breaking. "I can't stay here. I can't live like this." He was silent for a moment. "What happened? What's going on?" "I found out, Ian. I found out everything. About Caleb. About her. She's been cheating on me." There was a long pause before Ian spoke again. "I'm sorry, Lucas. I know how much you loved her." I ran my hand through my hair, frustration boiling in my chest. "I still love her. I don't know how to stop loving her, even though she's done this to me. I can't make sense of it." "I know, man," Ian said quietly. "But you have to realize something. You can't keep living like this. You can't keep holding on to something that's already broken. You deserve better." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I knew Ian was right. But the idea of letting go felt impossible. My heart was still tangled in the love I had for her, even though the trust had been shattered beyond repair. It wasn't just the affair that hurt, it was the fact that I didn't even see it coming. How could I have been so blind? "I know," I whispered. "I know. But I don't know how to let go." "I'm here for you," Ian said softly. "Whenever you need me. Just remember, it's okay to grieve, but it's also okay to move on." I ended the call, staring at the phone in my hand, and for the first time in days, I let myself break. Lyra's betrayal had torn me apart. I didn't know how to fix it, how to pick up the pieces of what was once my life. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in this limbo any longer. I couldn't live in the shadow of her lies, always wondering if I was enough. I wasn't sure what came next. But one thing was clear, I had to make a decision. It's strange how quickly a person can change when they're broken. One moment, I was a man who believed in the sanctity of love, in the unshakable foundation of trust and loyalty. The next, I was a man who no longer recognized the person staring back at him in the mirror. I spent the next few days in a haze of emotions that I couldn't control. One minute, I was angry. The next, I was numb. I had moments where I wanted to scream at Lyra, to confront Caleb and make him feel the weight of what he had done, but I stopped myself. The truth was, no one could fix what had already been broken. There was no redemption for what she had done, at least not in my eyes. But I couldn't stop thinking about her. Her laughter, her touch, the way she used to look at me like I was her world. I couldn't just let go of the years we'd spent together, the memories we had built. But each time I tried to reach out, to make things work, it felt like I was only digging the hole deeper. Her words, her excuses, they meant nothing anymore. I was a man lost in the wreckage of his own life, struggling to find meaning in the aftermath of betrayal. There were moments when I would catch a glimpse of her, Lyra sitting at the kitchen table, her face a mask of guilt and sorrow. The way her hands shook when she reached for a cup of coffee, the way her eyes darted away when I entered the room, as if she couldn't bear to meet my gaze. I wanted to tell her that I saw her pain, that I understood her remorse. But the truth was, I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. How could I? How could I trust her again? One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I sat across from her at the dining table. She hadn't said much since that night, her silence more deafening than any argument we could have had. But I could see it in her eyes, she wanted to explain, to beg for my forgiveness. She wanted us to go back to what we once had, but I wasn't sure I could. I wasn't sure I wanted to. Lucas, she said softly, her voice breaking the silence that had become our new normal. Please, just listen. I didn't respond at first. My eyes were fixed on my hands, which were clenched tightly around the edge of my coffee cup. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. Part of me wanted to reach out to her, to tell her that I still loved her, that I was willing to try. But the other part, the part that had been so badly hurt, wanted to push her away, to demand that she leave. I know I've made the worst mistake of my life, she continued, her voice trembling. And I know I can't take back what I've done. But I swear, Lucas, it was never about not loving you. I don't even know how it happened. It was like I was drowning, and Caleb, he was just there. But it doesn't change the fact that I love you. I always have. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, I almost believed her. Almost. But the memory of what I had seen, the texts, the secrecy, the lies, was too fresh in my mind. No matter how many times she apologized, no matter how many tears she shed, the wound she had caused couldn't heal with words alone. I don't know if I can believe you anymore, I finally said, my voice low and steady, though every word felt like it was being ripped from me. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. She nodded, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I'll do whatever it takes, Lucas. I'll give you space. I'll give you time. Please, just don't give up on us. But I had already given up on something, the trust, the foundation we had built together. And I wasn't sure if I could ever get it back. The next few days were a blur of uncertainty. Lyra tried to engage with me, to talk, to apologize. But I couldn't bring myself to care about her words. I was too wrapped up in my own emotions, my own betrayal. Every time I looked at her, all I could see was the woman who had lied to me, who had thrown away everything we had worked for. I took time off work. I needed the distance, the space to figure out what I wanted. And yet, every time I thought about the future, about what life could look like after this, the picture seemed so bleak. One night, I decided to leave. It was a sudden decision, driven by the overwhelming urge to escape the suffocating atmosphere of our home. I packed a bag and headed to a small apartment on the edge of town, one that I had rented months ago, but hadn't yet moved into. I didn't tell Lyra. I didn't want to face her, not yet. When I arrived at the apartment, the emptiness of it matched the emptiness I felt inside. The walls were bare, the air smelled of dust, and the silence felt heavier than anything I had ever known. It was a place where I could think clearly, where I could let the pain settle without the constant reminder of what I had lost. But it didn't make the pain go away. It only made it sharper, more pronounced. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to grieve. I cried, not for Lyra, not for the marriage we had lost, but for myself. I cried for the man I used to be, the man who had trusted, loved, and believed in the goodness of the woman who had broken his heart. I couldn't change the past, but I could try to make sense of it. I could decide what came next. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't go back. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. The next morning, I woke up in the small apartment, alone, feeling the weight of the silence all around me. I picked up my phone and saw that I had missed several calls from Lyra. She had left voicemails, all pleading for me to come home, to talk to her. But I didn't want to talk. Not yet. I needed more time. More space. I sent her a message instead: we need to talk. But not now. I need time to think. Please respect that. I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen. It was hard to believe that just a few weeks ago, everything felt so different. But now, I was standing on the edge of a decision that would change everything. And in the silence of that moment, I realized something: I wasn't just fighting for my marriage anymore. I was fighting for myself. Time moves in strange ways when you're in the middle of a storm. Some days felt like they lasted forever, stretching into eternity, while others passed in a blur, each moment indistinguishable from the last. The apartment became both my refuge and my prison. I was alone, left with nothing but my thoughts, and the silence seemed to echo louder with each passing day. Every part of me ached, not just for what had been lost but for the man I used to be, someone who trusted without question, who loved with all his heart. But those days felt distant now, like fragments of a life that belonged to someone else. I'd taken refuge in routine. I woke up early, went for long runs, cooked simple meals, and buried myself in work. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep my mind from spiraling. And then there were moments when everything stopped, when I found myself paralyzed by the weight of my thoughts. The apartment had become my sanctuary, yet it felt empty, even with my best efforts to fill it with the mundane tasks that kept me going. The messages from Lyra became fewer, and each time my phone buzzed with her name, it sent a wave of guilt and anger through me. I had to block her for a while. I couldn't face her pleas, her desperate apologies. It wasn't that I didn't care, it was that I cared too much. If I listened, if I let her back in, I feared I would lose what little sanity I had left. But every now and then, a memory would sneak up on me: her smile, the way she used to hold my hand in public, the warmth of her laughter. I missed her, more than I could admit, even to myself. She had been my whole world once, and now it felt like that world had crumbled at my feet. It was during one of those long nights, when I found myself unable to sleep, that my phone rang again. Lyra's name flashed across the screen. I hesitated, staring at it as if it were a foreign object, something I didn't recognize anymore. After a moment, I answered, knowing I couldn't avoid it forever. "Lucas," her voice trembled, full of vulnerability. "Please. I know I've hurt you beyond repair. But I need you to know, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to understand. I need you to know why it happened." I leaned back against the wall, closing my eyes. I had heard this before, over and over again. But something in her voice, something raw, something different, made me want to listen. "I don't think I can ever understand, Lyra," I said, my voice hoarse. "How could I? You lied to me. You betrayed me in the worst possible way. You gave someone else what was mine. I didn't mean to hurt you, Lucas." "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, a tear choking her words. "I was so lost. I felt like we were so far apart, like we were living separate lives. And Caleb, he made me feel alive again. He made me feel seen, heard. But I swear, I never stopped loving you. I don't know how to make it right. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes." I was silent for a long time. I wanted to scream, to tell her she was making excuses, that there was no justification for what she had done. But all I could feel was the crushing weight of disappointment. I had loved her more than I had ever loved anyone. And now, that love felt like a distant echo, something fragile and broken. I don't know what to say to you anymore, I finally muttered. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Lyra. You've shattered everything. Her voice broke. I know, Lucas. And I'm sorry. But please, don't give up on me. On us. I can't lose you. I wanted to tell her that it was too late. That everything was already lost. But instead, I simply said, I need more time. With that, I hung up, the silence falling over me like a heavy blanket. The next few days felt like a blur. I went through the motions, but nothing had the same meaning. I kept asking myself if I could ever move past this, if there was any part of me left that still wanted to salvage what was left of our marriage. I knew that something had shifted in me, a part of me had been irrevocably broken, and I didn't know how to put it back together. I took a walk to clear my head one afternoon, wandering the streets aimlessly. The city felt alive around me, bustling with energy and purpose, but I couldn't shake the heaviness in my chest. I passed couples, families, people with smiles on their faces, and it only made me feel more isolated, more empty. They had no idea what I was going through. They didn't know the kind of pain I was carrying. I found myself standing in front of a park bench where Lyra and I had shared one of our first dates, all those years ago. The memory hit me like a wave, and for a moment, I let myself remember how easy things had been back then. The days before secrets and lies, before I had to question everything. I closed my eyes, breathing in the air as if it could transport me back to that time when I was naive, when everything seemed possible. But the past was gone. It was a memory I could never fully reclaim. As I turned to leave, I noticed a figure standing in the distance, watching me. It was Caleb. My blood ran cold. I had heard of him, of course. He was the man who had torn my world apart. The man who had become the other half of the story I had never wanted to be part of. But seeing him in person, standing there as if he belonged, made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't explain. He walked toward me, his eyes unreadable. Lucas, he said, his voice calm, almost too calm. We need to talk. I didn't know if I wanted to hear what he had to say. I didn't know if I could. But something in his tone, something in his gaze, told me that this conversation was inevitable. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to face the man who had taken everything from me. Let's talk, I said, my voice colder than I intended. We sat on the park bench, the silence between us thick and uncomfortable. Caleb didn't speak immediately, instead staring straight ahead, as if gathering the right words. His presence was unsettling, but I couldn't deny the need to understand what had happened. To hear it from him, from the person who had been the catalyst for my suffering. I never wanted to hurt you, Lucas, Caleb said finally, his voice lacking the arrogance I had expected. Instead, it was laced with something I couldn't place, regret, perhaps. I never set out to destroy your life. But I knew what I was doing. I knew the risks. Then why, Caleb? I asked, my voice rising with a mix of confusion and rage. Why do it? Why did you let this happen? He looked at me, eyes softening for a moment. Because she was lost. And I was there for her when you weren't. I felt the sting of his words, but I couldn't let myself be angry at him anymore. He was a reflection of the distance that had grown between Lyra and me, the cracks in our marriage that I had been too blind to see. I can't blame you entirely, I muttered, my eyes darkening. You didn't make her fall in love with you. She made that choice. Caleb nodded, his expression unreadable. I know. But she wasn't herself when we started. She was hurting. She didn't know what she needed, what she was missing. I didn't force her into anything. She came to me. A bitter laugh escaped me. And now? Now, he hesitated, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of vulnerability. Now, I'm sorry. I never wanted to be the one to break you two apart. But I was there when she needed someone. I looked at him, my mind swirling with questions. With anger. With pain. I guess we both lost, then, I said quietly. Caleb didn't reply. Instead, he stood up, looking down at me with an unreadable expression. Take care of yourself, Lucas, he said, before walking away, leaving me with nothing but my thoughts and the undeniable truth that my world would never be the same again. The days that followed Caleb's visit felt like the final shattering of what was left of my life. Lyra's voice, pleading and soft, had been replaced by the harsh silence that echoed through the empty rooms of our home. It wasn't just the silence of a marriage falling apart, it was the silence of two people who had been so deeply intertwined, yet now couldn't even find the words to speak to one another. We were strangers. And no matter how much we both longed to go back to the way things had been, neither of us knew how to begin. I continued living in my small apartment, a temporary refuge from everything that felt like it was falling apart. But it wasn't much of a refuge, it was only a place to escape to when the weight of the world seemed unbearable. My thoughts consumed me, and I found myself replaying the same scenes over and over again, the discovery of the affair, Lyra's tearful apologies, Caleb's calm demeanor. The guilt I had carried with me from the first moment of the betrayal now felt like a constant companion. I began to question everything. How did I not see it? How could I have been so blind? The reality of the situation was that I had never truly understood the distance between Lyra and I until it had become unbridgeable. I had been so caught up in the mundane rhythm of our life, in the comfortable routine of raising kids, paying bills, and simply existing together, that I failed to notice her drifting further and further away from me. And now that I saw it, now that the truth had been laid bare, it felt too late. There was no going back. The first time I saw Lyra after Caleb's visit, I was overwhelmed with an unfamiliar sensation. I didn't recognize her anymore. She seemed smaller, fragile, as though she had been worn down to nothing by her own guilt. I knew that she was hurting. But the pain was mutual, and the burden of trying to understand where we went wrong seemed too great for either of us to carry alone. She approached me one afternoon, standing by the door of my apartment, her face a mix of hope and desperation. She hadn't looked like this in years, broken, but trying so hard to piece herself back together. Lucas, please, she whispered, her voice trembling. I'm so sorry. I know I've hurt you in a way I can't take back, but I want to fix this. I want to be your wife again. I don't know how to make it right, but I need you to know. I still love you. I stood there, my heart in pieces. I could see her pain, her regret, and yet, I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. The words were there, hovering on the edge of my tongue, I still love you too. But they wouldn't come out. I wanted to say something to ease her suffering, to tell her that we could find a way back to each other. But I was afraid that if I let myself believe those words, would only be fooling both of us. Lyra, I said quietly, my voice steady but distant, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. I can't go back to the way things were. You've changed, and I've changed too. We're not the same people we were before all of this happened. Tears filled her eyes, and for a moment, I almost couldn't bear it. But I pushed it down, knowing that if I didn't set boundaries now, I would lose myself completely. I never wanted to hurt you, Lucas. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I know you don't believe me, but I swear, I love you. I always have. Her voice broke, and I felt an undeniable pull toward her, toward the woman I had once loved with all my heart. But I had learned something painful during these weeks of separation: love wasn't enough. Love couldn't erase the damage that had been done. And even if I wanted to forgive her, even if I could forgive her, something deep inside me knew that I couldn't forget. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking in a shaky breath. When I opened them again, I looked at her. I don't know what's next for us, Lyra. But I don't think I can continue like this. I'm too broken. She nodded, silent tears now streaming down her face. I reached out and touched her arm, just once, before pulling away. It wasn't a sign of reconciliation, nor was it a gesture of finality. It was simply a moment of connection. A shared understanding that neither of us had the answers. That maybe, we were too far gone to ever find them. I watched her leave, her shoulders hunched in defeat, and it was then that I realized, there would be no grand closure for us. No healing embrace or heartfelt promises. There would only be the cold, harsh reality that sometimes love wasn't enough to heal what had been broken. A week later, I received the divorce papers. The words on the page were both final and relieving. There was no more pretending, no more hoping for a miracle. What we had was over. It wasn't the way I had imagined things ending. I had hoped for some kind of peace, for the ability to look back at our years together with gratitude for what they had been. But all I could feel now was exhaustion. Exhaustion from trying to hold on to something that no longer existed. Exhaustion from holding on to a love that had turned into something unrecognizable. I signed the papers. And as I sat there, staring at the document that marked the end of everything I had known, I felt a strange sense of relief. It wasn't because I hated Lyra. It wasn't because I no longer loved her. It was simply because I had finally let go. I had finally accepted that the life we once had was something I would never get back. And maybe, just maybe, that was okay. The next few days were a blur. I packed up my things from the apartment, unsure of where I would go next, but certain that I couldn't stay here. I had no clear direction, no plan, only the knowledge that I needed to move forward. To build something new. And then, just as quickly as it had all fallen apart, a single thought came to me in the silence: I deserve to heal too.